What are the commonalities among leaders who sustain excellence over an extended period of time?
All right, here we go. Arthur Blank, so good to have you here on the Learning Leader Show. Welcome, man.
Thank you, Ryan. It's good to be with you and good to have a chance to visit and chat and fire away. I know you got a lot of questions, and you're one of the few people that have actually read both of our books, Built from Scratch.
Well, I was going to tell everyone, Good Company's fantastic, and you should get that one. But the Built from Scratch is literally one of those books that should be on your shelf, and you reread probably once a year about if you care to build something that's values driven and worthy of your time investment. It's a really well done book called Built from Scratch. So Arthur, it's certainly my pleasure to be with you, but I actually want to start at a different place maybe than you normally would. And that's your mom, actually. When your dad had ran a business for 4 years and unfortunately and tragically died. And your mom, though, not only picked up the slack as a single parent, but then also picked up the slack running the business. Yes. And so I'd first love to hear some about what you learned from your mom.
Well, I think I learned a lot from her. I think, a second book, Good Company, or my own book, if you will, talks a lot about, values and human connections and what have you. And I think for most of us, they start out at an early age. And in my case, they certainly started with my mother and father. My dad, as you said, started his own business when he was in early 40s, passed away when he was 44, sadly. And my mother, who was a very principled, values-driven kind of person, she took over the reins and didn't have any business experience. And she dealt with adversity and ended up running the business very successfully. And it was sold later to a large company, which ensured her financial stability for the rest of her life. And it really allowed my brother and I to, pursue whatever dreams that we personally had. But, I think my mother probably had the greatest influence on me. She always used the phrase, the principle matters. And I think that's helped build, my response to a whole lot of situations, opportunities, adversities, whatever it may be. So she had a huge effect on my life, and she lived to almost be 100 years old. She was only 4 months short of 100 when she passed away. So it was a long life. It was a meaningful life. She believed in making a difference and giving back to people in any way that she could. And she tried hard to do that. And I think she did do that very successfully.
Wow. So Arthur, just so you know, I got a ton of notes and moments, inflection points in your life that I want to hit on each of those, or as many as we can. So now let's fast forward to 1978. You get fired from a job. Right. Difference of opinion. We can get into that. And at that point, then with one of your friends, you decide to start a business. Can you take us to that moment, 1978, how you were feeling and what you thought when you got fired, and then why you decided to do what you did next?
Well, when I got fired in 78, Bernie Marcus, who was the co-founder of Home Depot with me, we were running the most successful chain of home improvement center stores in the country called Handy Dan Home Improvement Centers. And it was a political rift really between himself, Bernie, and Sandy Sigaloff, who was the chairman of the parent company. And we were the only division making any money. So it was a tax treaty. We would send our taxes upstream to them. But there was a lot of, strife between the two of them, particularly over who was going to take responsibility for the success of our business. And at the end of the day, when they called us in, we were actually there to present. We were living in Orange County. That's where the offices were, Southern California. And they called us to their offices, which were in the West LA area. And went to the meeting and we present our 5-year plan. And then they asked to separate us, which was really kind of weird to begin with, because that was not usual. And so at the time they said to me, well, we have situations, we're going to make a change with you and Bernie. And And I almost, I mean, the company itself that we were running was incredibly successful. And so I was shocked. And, I didn't think it was a joke because I knew that they were serious. I mean, I could have thought it was a joke, but I didn't. But I do remember when I called my house, after being there for a couple of hours and spoke to my wife, and she started laughing. She said, "Well, that can't be." I said, "Well, no, actually, it really is, Diana. That's what happened." So she still didn't believe me. I had a 3-hour drive home from West LA to Fullerton, where I lived. Traffic as usual in LA. And by the time I got home, the LA Times had called the house, and the Wall Street Journal had called the house. And so she knew by the time I got home, this was serious. So, but it was I mean, I didn't take it really personally. I was shocked by it because I knew it had nothing to do with me. And really, quite candidly, really had nothing to do with the performance of Bernie either. It was just kind of a political power thing, which was obviously very sad. But Bernie and I, we both had a lot of confidence in ourselves. We both have a lot of opportunities at that time, and basically said, and we had done the stock, we were our stock, if you will, of the parent company had done very well. So we had some financial investors that said they'd be happy to invest in us if we want to stay in retail, stay in this industry. So we elected to do that. And we said at that time, if we ever had to compete against the large, no frills, down market, big box store, with low prices, great assortment, great services, that we couldn't do it. So if we couldn't do it and we were the best in the industry, why not try to reinvent that opportunity, which we did, with the Home Depot. So that was 78, 79. We opened up our first stores, but going through all of that was pretty traumatic. It gave me an opportunity to do some running. I ran my first marathon that year. I had some time off, so I was able to train for marathon and run it, and that was meaningful. And we developed a model for the Home Depot, and we had a lot of financial support, so starting the company wasn't an issue. Although we did lose half our startup money. In the first 9 months we were in business, we lost half of what we had. So there was a whole series of learnings going through that as well. But the rest is history, and the company's being run just beautifully today.
I read that you and Bernie shared a bathroom at the original Home Depot headquarters, and there is a hallway outside of the bathroom, and you guys would hang press clippings,
right?
But not the ones that you would think, not the ones that most companies hang. You hung negative stories and criticism so that you guys would see them in the hallway when you would, in between your offices in the bathroom. What made you do that?
Well, number one, we shared. I mean, I've shared a bathroom with him for almost 40 years. So he's a combination kind of brother, father to me in many ways. He's 91 today and in great health and doing wonderfully. So I'm happy to share that with, our listeners. I think, the attitude was, I think it's true in sports. I think it's true in business. I said, one of the worst things that you can have is any sense of complacency. And so once we started to be successful and to be able to produce the kind of financial results that we did for the 23 years that I was there, it was a great tendency or great, potentiality for, sitting back, reading your press clippings, believing everything everybody was saying about us. And, during the 23 years I was there, our sales per year grew by 48, 49%. Our earnings grew by 49%. The stock, which went public in 81, grew by almost 50%. So, it was one of the great retail stories in the last 100 years in America. So we had to continue to run scared. We had to continue to find ways that we were concerned about, are we servicing our customers, both DIY and pro, as fully as we needed to? Are we still concerned about our competition? So that was the emphasis. I mean, we had so many senior people that joined us over the years that would come out of their first meeting with our management team and say, shoot, I mean, this company sounds like it's on the verge of bankruptcy. I mean, really, because we would stress, I mean, we would acknowledge the good stuff and celebrate the good stuff, but we would focus on the opportunities, focus on those things that we could have done better. So, it's important to celebrate success for all the right reasons for our own associates. But if you want to get better, you really have to focus on, how do you do that? And that's true in sports, and it's certainly true in the business world.
When I'm always fascinated, Arthur, by people who make hiring decisions, and you've had to make hiring decisions for a long time,
Yeah.
both at Home Depot and the other businesses you run, as well as in the front office of an NFL team with the Atlanta Falcons, from your general manager, head coach, who we mentioned briefly before starting recording. What this is broad, but what are some of the qualities you look for in a person to hire for a leadership role?
Well, it's Ryan. That's a really good question. Can I give you a little bit of a longish answer to that?
Hey, it's yeah, you're my guest.
It's probably the most important question that you might ask today
Mhm.
for our listeners. So when we went public in September of '81, we were in business then for a couple of years, had stores opened up since June of '79. And I got a visitor who I had lunch with him. His name was Joe Ellis, who then was one of the managing partners for Goldman Sachs, and was generally considered the most, probably one of the brightest minds on Wall Street in terms of understanding, retail businesses and understanding what made success and what didn't, et cetera. So we had lunch together. And I remember one of the things Joe said to me, he said, you realize, and he didn't ask me a question, he said it as a statement. He said, you realize, you have these 4 stores in Atlanta, you've announced additional 4 stores in South Florida, which we opened up in the fall of '81. And he said, but this culture that you have in Atlanta is so unique. I don't think you can be able to transfer that to South Florida and to any other markets that you're considering. So I didn't debate it with him, because it was like, talking to the guru of retailing. And we'd only been in this business for a couple of years, et cetera. But I thought about it. I thought about it a lot. And 2 weeks later, I went in to see my partner, Bernie. I said, Bernie, I had lunch with Joe Ellis a couple of weeks ago. And, Bernie and I both knew how critical our culture was in driving the success of our business in every way. Living these values that we talk about: put people first, listen and respond, include everybody, innovate continuously, lead by example, and give back to others. And that, he was convinced that there's no way we could carry that forward. And I said, the only way we can do this, and I've thought about it, is that, if we promote or hire, either case, but firstly promote people based on their understanding of our culture, their understanding of being ambassadors for our culture. Do they understand it? Can they articulate it? Most importantly, can they live it, or do they live it in terms of their function? So that meant that people who became assistant store managers, regional managers, merchandisers, presidents of divisions, things of that nature, in order to get into the conversation whether or not they were promotable, the first question was always, can this person lead? And lead means, in our case, can they lead using these values that we didn't document at that time, but we did some years later. But we all knew what they were. And so we had a lot of people that were really good at what they were doing, but they may not have been the best in terms of understanding our culture and leading by it. So I think that became, a critical decision in our ability to get to 2,200 stores. And we're, whether it was my counterpart at Lowe's some years later when I was playing golf at Augusta and he was over there, said to me, we could never figure out, how did you ever maintain this culture and all these businesses, stores in Canada and Mexico, throughout the United States. Had a second occasion where McKinsey was writing a book on, it's called The War for Talent. And they were examining like 5 or 6 companies, and we were the last company they did for the book. And the senior partner, who was based in Chicago, came to see me and he said, I've talked to 100 of your associates, a lot of engineers, cashiers, salespeople, right up the line, assistant managers, store managers, offices, et cetera. And we talked to them in Canada, we talked to them in Mexico, and we talked to them in the United States. He said, everybody we spoke to they use a little different words sometimes, but they all understood your culture. Everybody. It was remarkable. I mean, we could not find anybody who didn't understand it and wasn't living it. So that was the greatest compliment that I think that we ever got. And probably the most important thing in our success is that we had no dilution of our culture. We did for 6 years after I left the company when another gentleman ran it. But when Frank Blake and then Craig Manier, who runs the company today as chairman CEO, took over, those embers were still there. They were still strong. They didn't have to do much to get them ignited again into a beautiful flame, which supports the company today. But so, I would say to anybody in any business is that, the first thing you really need to consider when you're growing a business is hiring people, promoting people, bringing people in any way, shape, or form. Do they understand whatever your culture is? Doesn't have to be the same as our culture at HD and all of our businesses today, which is really what good company is about, is that how it translates into all these different businesses and different geographies and different industries. But do they understand your culture? Do they follow it? Are they ambassadors for it? It's not a question, can they read it from a script and, yeah, I've got it all memorized, but do they live it? And living your culture in each of our businesses, I think, is really important. And to us today, that's the common ground, the human relationship that bonds fans, customers, guests with our associates in communities, to the communities, and those human relationships is what drives all of our decision making today.
How does that go from, because I think a lot of people, they think that, they realize that, but they struggle to execute on that.
Yeah, you're 100% right, Ryan. And we did as well.
Yeah. What are some of the ways, like, let's say someone's listening who's like, I agree, I want that for my business or my team.
So I'll give you an example of when we didn't do it. We were growing in 19, I'm trying to think of the year. Gosh, we acquired the stores from Bowater. It was in the 80s. I can't remember the year. But in any event, it was 9 stores. We were not a large company then. We were fairly small, and we had basically 20 something odd stores, 24 stores. And it was basically a real estate play. They were operating in our industry, but doing really poorly. So an example would be where we thought we could take those stores over. We could physically, convert them, change the merchandising, train the people, and keep the stores open. We didn't want to give up whatever volume they had. We didn't want to give it up. Turned out, 60, 90 days later, we realized that that's like trying to change tires on a car going 30, even 30 miles an hour, 20 miles an hour. It's going to be really painful and very difficult to do. So eventually we closed the stores. We had to retrain all the associates. We kept the ones that were trainable. We let the other ones go. So when we reopened those stores, it looked and felt, most importantly, it felt, like a Home Depot. And I think another point was that when we were opening up stores at the rate of 200 a year, one every day and a half, opening up at HD, Bernie and I went to the board and said, is a chapter in the book on good company talks about how the wheels can wobble on a wagon, if you will. So the point of that is that I think it's okay and it's sometimes healthy, to stress an organization. But when you stress it too much, then things break down. The wagon in this case would break down, the business would break down, if you will. So we realized opening up stores every day and a half that was going to be, we couldn't sustain our culture in all of these new stores over a long period of time. So what we did is that we went to the board and we self-imposed a restriction. We said, we're going to grow no faster than 25% a year. So after that, we maintained, that healthy growth rate, but it was all based on just one thing. It wasn't based on finding sites. It wasn't based on getting merchandise. It wasn't based on hiring people. It was based on whatever number of people we had in the organization, either promotable or people we brought in from the outside. Could we train them in our culture? Do they live the culture? If not, we had to slow the wagon down slow enough to whatever speed it had to be. Even if it had to come to a grinding halt, we had to slow it down to make sure the individuals we had working in any of our stores at that time, today in all of our businesses, could handle that growth. So I think, and that takes discipline, because a lot of times as an entrepreneur, what you want to do, Ron, you want to keep growing. You want to keep growing, and growth is great. But if you have dilution and growth in your model and what you're delivering to whoever you're delivering it to, customers, fans, guests, manufacturing, whatever it may be, then that's really not sustainable. So it takes discipline to do that. And it takes a belief that training is important. You can't always see the results the next day. Sometimes we were training people at the onset of HD, and we had no money for training. I mean, we really had no money for training, but we started to train people because, we knew at that time that if we didn't train them, that over time, that this unique service we were offering to the people we were serving, our customers at that time, and with each other's associates, that would become very diluted. So we were concerned about that.
You mentioned a few of those years that the business suffered, and this was right after you had left, and the board selected Bob Nardelli to be the CEO, who was he worked with Jack Welch but did not get Jack's job when Jack retired. And he even mentioned on TV, I believe, that he really wanted it after accepting the depot job.
Well, he not only mentioned it on TV, he wrote an article. He was interviewed by Fortune magazine.
Yeah.
Front cover.
I one of the things I read about him is he was a profit-minded guy with a reputation for black belt efficiency, yet so he was a slash, cut costs, and it really just a short-term thinker, because you can have some short-term gains that way, but you were the opposite in the fact that you're always focusing on adding and building. So I would say you're always a long game player versus a guy like him who may see some short-term success. And I think for leaders listening, it's important for them to hear this, Arthur, is the fact that, just like you said, that one line, we didn't have money for training and we did it anyway.
Right.
I think that's really, I'd love for you to expand on that mindset to build a long-term, sustainable, growing business. Is, yes, you can short-term cut and do those things and hit some numbers, but that's not sustainable long-term.
No, it's not. Well, I mean, it becomes, you have to wrap whatever service or product that you're delivering to the people that you're serving, whatever it may be, it's the customers in this case. You have to wrap that around a certain kind of caring mentality. The customers come first, you'll do whatever it takes, et cetera. And it takes time to really inject that into associates. I mean, you're not interested in relationships, you're not interested in transactions, you're only interested in relationships. So, all of our businesses today, whether it be our football team, our soccer team, our guest ranches, our PGA golf superstores, the largest golf retail in America today, it's all about long-term relationships, and you make decisions for the long term that are the right decisions based on, in this case, our culture, the things I mentioned earlier, or whatever culture somebody else is running their business by. And but it takes time. It just takes time to train people to see if they get it, and then obviously, if you're in a business where product knowledge is important, which is, very important in our golf business, it's very important in our ranching business. We take, we lead people on all kinds of horseback riding and fly fishing and hiking. Those leaders, they got to know not only our culture, but they got to know what they're doing. Otherwise, their people are going to be in harm's way. So, and I could joke and say, if we keep playing football the way we are, we got to keep our fans out of harm's way as well, because they're getting angry. But anyway, that's another subject.
Speaking of the football team, I love this story, and I want you to tell it. You really wanted to buy the team, and so I'm going to set up the story and then let you finish it.
Okay.
You booked a nice hotel suite, dinner, wine, and it's with Taylor Smith, who was the son of the owner, and the owner had passed away, and now he was the owner of the Atlanta Falcons. I'll let you take it from there. Can you share what happened that night?
I mean, Taylor was a really good guy. I had met the father some years before, and I mean, he thought somebody introduced us, and he thought I was actively trying to buy this team, which I was not. So, we first met to have lunch. His name was Rankin Smith. So Rankin said, well, even before I sat down, he said, the team's not for sale. I said, Rankin, I'm not here to buy the team. I said, if you want to want, I'll have lunch. If not, I'll leave now. He said, no, sit down, sit down. So at the end of the lunch, he said to me, the team is really not for sale. He said, well, if you ever had to find a buyer for this team in Atlanta, Georgia, you would be a perfect owner. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Hope you live a long time. I have season tickets, club seats. I'll be there forever. I'll be a supporter, etc. Dad passes away. Taylor had 4 siblings, and so he had the authority, though. Taylor was the only employee of the Falcons. He was the president and CEO, but he had the authority to negotiate the sale of the team after the estate was settled with the IRS. And every time Taylor and I would meet, the first thing he would say to me, he would say, well, the team's not for sale. So I'd say, okay, it's nice to see you again, Taylor. Once a year we'd meet. I said, we have a nice visit, etc. So long story short, at one point, the family decided they wanted to sell the team because the kids all wanted to do another number of things with their share of the proceeds. So we went through this dance, and I said to Taylor, look, I said, I'm not going to end up in a bidding contest. Whatever the fair price is, you'll hire an investment banker. We'll hire an investment banker. Whatever the fair price is, I'll be happy to pay. I mean, I don't, your dad and I had a decent relationship. You and I have a good relationship. So he said, fine. So I remember he calling me. I was at a Staples board meeting in Dallas, and he was getting really nervous. He had never done, transactions of this size. And it was a big transaction at that time. The team was sold for $545 million at that time, which is a public number. So we were about, I don't know, $10, $15 million apart, maybe $20 million apart. And so I said, Taylor, why don't we just meet? I'll come back tonight from Dallas. We'll get a hotel room, be quiet, it'll be out of the public's eye. And he was single at the time. So I said, we'll get a nice room. He'll have a grand piano in there. I said, we'll have dinner and then I'll leave and you can use the hotel room for whatever you want. So he said, great. So we had dinner, went through a couple of bottles of wine, which is a lot for me and a lot for him probably. And we ended up settling on the price, and which is $545 million. The funny part, one of the funny parts of the story, well, one of you said to me, I started to take out a cloth napkin and started to sign it. And I said, I, Taylor Smith, agreed. He said, what are you doing? He said, I'm just writing this on a napkin and a pen. And I agree. Taylor Smith agreed to sell the Atlanta Falcons to Arthur Blank for $545 million. He said, well, you don't have to write that down. He said, well, no, you and I are both going to sign this tonight. And he got real nervous right away. And he said, how come we got to sign it? He said, it's kind of like a blood oath, Taylor. So we would do this periodically at HD where we're trying to get division president to meet certain budget numbers or planning numbers, et cetera. So he said, okay, I'll sign it. And first he said, well, I really can't sign without my siblings. I said, you and I both know that's not true. You have power of authority, power of attorney, I should say. So you do have the authority to sign it. So he did sign it. I signed it. We have that napkin frame that's up at Flowery Branch where the team is. But in any event, we went through the process, and I really, I would say, this, Ryan, it was typical of the way I like to negotiate, which ends up being a win-win for everybody. I don't like win losses. I mean, it's okay for a football game, as your brother would tell you. But in terms of business, it's not a sustainable kind of relationship, because then somebody who always loses always wants to get back, and they're angry. They're never happy about the deal they do. They find a way to rebalance it some other time, whether it be with manufacturers or service people. It's not the best way to leave a relationship. So, the family really wanted to use their assets for their own personal lives and their philanthropy, et cetera. And obviously, I thought I could do a better job than they were doing in running the franchise. And despite our performance, the last couple of years, we've won at a rate of 50% better than was their record since the franchise was founded in 1966. So I've got a great relationship with Taylor still, and he comes to games, a season ticket holder, and we love having him. And we enjoy it. And to me, it wasn't really about the money. I wasn't really looking at it as an investment. I mean, I knew it had to be a reasonable investment. I thought it had to be a reasonable investment. Has it done much better The NFL, as you all know, and your listeners know, the NFL is probably the best professional sports league in the world. And dealing with this crazy year we're in now. But it really was a way to kind of give back to the community. I felt that Atlanta had been so good to me that, I didn't realize till the closing when Commissioner Tagliabue, who's commissioner then as opposed to Roger, and Paul was the brightest guy in the room, not because he told you that, just was. And Paul said, you realize the team you just bought never had back-to-back winning seasons. I said, he said, pardon the French, are you shitting me? I said, that's impossible. He said, no, go take a look at it. So I looked at it and he was right. So we've since broken that record many times and have had a number of back-to-back winning seasons. But it was, it's been an exciting journey for me. And, it has its, as your brother knows, it has its ups and downs, and losses are always worse than the wins. But we continue to work on it. So
in the lobby of your Atlanta offices, you have this custom bronze statue I read of a Sioux warrior in full battle regalia. He can't move from his position on the battlefield. He will stand his ground until victory or death. Right. His chin's proudly lifted, his eyes scanning the horizon. And it's entitled Point of No Return. It depicts a time-honored tradition of Sioux leadership. Can you share more about why that's important to you and why that's there?
Well, it's the Strongheart Society, which was part of the Sioux Indians, and what they would do is they would take their best warrior, their best fighter, and he would go out ahead as a leader and drive a stake in the ground, and he would be fastened to that stake. He couldn't leave it. He'd be fastened to that stake, and he would be there to protect, as the first line of defense against whoever was going to be coming forward. And he would be one of the best fighters, strongest leader, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a great position of leadership. And a good example, you can't lead from the back, you got to lead from the front. And, hopefully today people don't interpret that as giving up their lives, as what often that person did. But it set an example for them, those tribes at that time, in terms of the power of being a strong leader and doing whatever it takes to protect families, protect the things that were critical to them.
I love it. You also, I've read, name all of your conference rooms after personal heroes. And one of them is Kurt Hahn, I think I'm pronouncing it right, founder of Outward Bound, and that is to strive, to serve, and not to yield. I'd love to learn about your heroes and him and what that quote means, and maybe another hero or two that you name your conference rooms after.
Well, he was one. He was born in Germany. He was there when Hitler came to power. He was Jewish. He left to protect himself and his family. He moved to Scotland, and they couldn't figure out during the Second World War why the more experienced, the older sailmen, oh, that's not the right word, the older the oldest sailors, I'm sorry, the oldest sailors for the English Navy, why they would survive when they were attacked by submarines, which is a way they lost a lot of their fleet. But the younger sailors who were fitter and stronger and what have you would often die. So what Kurt Hahn found out is that, because they were older, they weren't as physically powerful, but they were smart, they were experienced, they knew how to use their minds, they knew how to be flexible, change plans, et cetera. And so, the whole notion of Outward Bound came from that, of how to get people prepared to deal with, whatever their adversities are in life. A lot of times people think of Outward Bound as a survival program. It really is not. It was when it first started, but it's really not today. And it's in 42, 44 countries and have a number of centers in the United States and schools in the United States and really throughout the world. So the notion of, to serve, to strive, and not to yield, to me represents, from my standpoint, a lot of the ways that I view life. Quite honestly, it's to serve, and that we do that in our businesses. We do it in our guest ranches with all of our guests there. We do it in our stadiums with our Falcon fans and soccer fans. We do it in our PGA business with our customers. We do it with our foundation, with our grantees. So it's about serving, and to strive means to constantly get better. We talked about that. Why do you put up, why do you only frame the bad, news articles and not the good ones? Because we want to make sure we understand that, we have to be a little bit like a gerbil on a wheel, and it keeps going around. We got to find new ways to improve, new ways to get better, acknowledging the good stuff, but keeping that, foot on the gas, if you will. And then, to not yield, which is a strong part of living, as we live through 2020. And, we all have trauma in our lives in a whole variety of different ways. And how you get through trauma, how you learn from it, how you come out the other side stronger and more knowledgeable, and personally and for your family and for the community. All those things are very important in life. And those will never change. And certainly, dealing with adversity in 2020 has been a really strong challenge for all of us in America. So,
given that,
yeah.
certainly, given that the Falcons they're written about constantly. All NFL teams are. It's a what have you done for me lately business. Yeah. It's really tough. You can go to the Super Bowl one year and then get fired the next year. How do you manage through that with your executive team, with Thomas Dimitroff and all of the leaders with the Falcons? Especially the easiest thing and what gets talked about the most in the public is just fire the coach. Fire the second things go bad, you fire the coach.
Right.
Well, how do you manage through all of that noise in order to focus and do the work?
Well, Ryan, it's a really good question. It goes back to, I think, something you commented on earlier, which is really the premise of really all of our decision making in the context of these values. But it's all based on not doing things for the short term, doing things for the long term. Mm-hmm. So still today, people would say, well, your team is 0-3, which is what they are, and we should be 2-1. We lost 2 games in the last seconds of the fourth quarter that we should have won, and the coach should be the first to say that. Mm-hmm. But it is what it is. Like Bill Parcells used to say, you are what your record is. So we are what our record is. But I think it's important to think about things from a long-term standpoint. It's important to think about not just the transaction of the moment, the immediate pleasing that or immediate feeling good of that, but it may not be the long-term decision. So I would go back and people would say this year, he said, well, maybe you should have made a change with your coach into last year. It was 7-9 for the second year in a row. And my answer today, even at 0-3, was that I think at the end of last year, that was the right decision. The back half of the year, we were 6-2. We were 8th in the NFL in defense. We were in the top 5 in offense. I mean, it appeared we had made the coaching changes we needed to make in terms of assignments. It moved some chess pieces around the board a little bit. And our performance was substantially better. No reason not to think that after an off season, we can be active in free agency and active with a good draft class again. You wouldn't even get better. So, you have to think about these things. I mean, you're there for the fans, mm-hmm. but you can't let those immediate feelings of disappointment drive long-term decisions. You got to build that in and say, what's the right thing for the long term, based on where we are. And sometimes that means even, you'll have, as you well know, and your brother certainly knows, you'll have coaches in the NFL that you look at Coach Reid as an example, who I love, Andy Reid from Kansas City. He had an incredible record at Philadelphia. If you talk to Jeff Lurie still loves him today. And Jeff Lurie couldn't have been happier last year in Kansas City when he won the Super Bowl. But Coach Reid, looking back in that regard, I mean, he had gotten them to the championship game like 5 times, the Super Bowl, and they never won. So at some point, Jeff, I probably said to himself, look, and this guy can get us just to this point and just can't find a way to get us over the next sledge. So he made the change. He's got a really good coach now. And obviously Coach Reid has gone to Kansas City, built an incredible team, great offense. And he's a great human being.
Mhm.
And, he's doing really well. And obviously they won a Super Bowl last year. So sometimes, people need to change the scenery too. And sometimes the environment can get stale. And it's not often the case, but sometimes it is the case.
Uh, Absolutely, Arthur. I realize we're up against the clock, and you got to get on a
Oh,
plane to go to the game. If
the,
you got to run,
no, I'm okay. Do you have one last? My
I
answers tend to be too
I have
long,
one
honestly.
more. I mean, I have 100 more questions, but I can
Yeah.
ask one more
Okay.
question. You've written about the fact that you should treat every team member as a free agent, and
Right.
I thought this really spoke to me as a
Yeah.
leader within a business that a guy like you would think this and put it down on paper about why this is important. Can you share your philosophy around
Yeah.
treating every team member as
Yeah.
if they're a free agent?
It goes back to the days at the Home Depot. When I left the Home Depot, we had 250,000 associates. We had 150 officers. We didn't have one under contract. And because of the success of the company, our officer group, our leaders they were getting called all the time. Can you come here? Come here. Somebody else would be hoping, well, they could come and bring some magic dust and sprinkle it on us, and we'll become like the Home Depot. So I've never felt associates should be committed based on a piece of paper. They should be committed based on they love the culture, they live the culture, they want to be part of this unique organization, team, et cetera. And I feel that way really about our players today. I mean, our football players, our soccer players as well. That I know we have them under contract. I get it, but we shouldn't treat them that way. We should treat them as though every year they're a free agent. So we should earn their loyalty, earn their commitment, earn their passion, earn their energy, earn their time, earn everything that they're giving us because they want to be here. And it's a special place. When I first, bought the Falcons in 2001, our then general manager would tell me, he said, I would call, like during free agency, I would call and, I couldn't get a hold of any agents and players didn't want to come. We have changed that today. We're an active participant in free agency. When it comes to players that we want to keep, we want to extend their contracts. They are, as long as it's competitive, which it should be. You don't want to have a player feel like they're being taken advantage of. A competitive contract, but they want to stay because the environment is one that it's a healthy environment. It's one that appreciates who they are and what they are. It's one where I personally care not only about their performance on the field, but I know the majority of the players, I know their families, I know their kids, I know what their interests are post football. We're here to help them. I'm here to help them in any of that regard. I don't cross the line. I mean, I don't cross the football line. No one calls me about football plays. No one asks me, and they shouldn't ask me. But the players know that I care about them. They're not just a commodity. They're a human being that's giving us, as you well know from your family, a tremendous amount every Sunday, physically, mentally, emotionally, and so you want that commitment to be there, but you want to earn it every single day, every single year. They should never feel like I'm there because I have a contract, I have to stay. You want always to have the environment where your team, our team, is the best place to be in the NFL. Now, we got to perform at that level, but you really want players to feel that way.
Most definitely. By the way, Coach, I'm sorry, Arthur, your quarterback.
It's an honor, so thank you very much.
Okay, Coach, your quarterback, Matt Ryan. I was fortunate to walk around a golf with him in Lake Tahoe. AJ played in the celebrity tournament. I caddied, and Matt was in our group.
Oh,
Man, what a just. I remember after the round, we both looked at each other and it's like, that's a dude I'd want to follow. He just seems like an ideal guy to lead, because super humble, really nice. He was a good player too, a good golfer, but just a really solid quality person.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. And I would say, I would think that the great majority of our players fall into that category. Yeah. And I think that our players, they play for the right reasons. They care about the right things. I think one of the things I would say I'm very proud of our players, and players really across the NFL today and the world of soccer, I would say as well, is that, this whole notion of dealing with all the issues relating to social unrest and, civil rights, injustices and, dealing with equality and equity. And I mean, I salute what they're doing. I salute the fact that they're, using their platform and using their voices to try to make a difference and to try to, give back and accelerate, changes that need to be accelerated, at least in my view. So I think you're seeing our league in many ways at its very best, and seeing our players at their very best. And Matt is certainly that way. He's a great leader and a great person, and he is a heck of a golfer. So yeah,
good. He was good. He was very hard on himself, but he was great, which is a common theme among some of the guys who are the best. Coach, I'm sorry again, Arthur, I know you got to run to get to this game tonight. So thank you so much for investing your time with me today. The book is called Good Company Forward by Jimmy Carter. And I'm very grateful for your team for sending it to me. I found myself, as I was reading it, not being able to stop. Read it right up until the moment that we connected here on Zoom. So thank you for taking the time to put that in writing. It's really well done on top of everything else that you've done.
Okay. And please tell your brother I said hi.
Okay? I will. Thanks so much. Good seeing you. Good luck tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. See ya.